When your lawyer calls before the sun sips up, you brace yourself for a stranger sip's betrayal. I wasn't seps ready to learn it was my own blood. That's the line that split my life clean down the middle. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. March 14th, 2018. Asheville, North Carolina. Fog draped over the lake like wet linen, softening everything that used to feel safe. I stood barefoot on the porch. I'd built myself, watching the mist curl around the railing, when my phone buzzed against the wood. Sisiu es 58 de la mañana. Rebecca Shaw. Rebecca doesn't call it dawn unless something's on fire. I answered. Kaison, she said. No greeting, no warmth, just the kind of voice that sounds like a hand slamming down on the emergency brake. Come in now. That tone didn't leave room for denial. I grabbed my truck keys from the hook, glanced once at Maya's black mug still half full of yesterday's coffee, and walked out the door without finishing it. I didn't know it then, but nothing in that house would taste the same again. The drive into town was 22 minutes of silence. No radio, no hum, just the slow turning of something dark in my chest. Rebecca's office sits on Lexington Avenue, tucked above a pawn shop that never opens before 10. The hallway smelled like dust and printer ink. When I pushed the door open, she was already at the window, hair pulled tight, glasses low, the manila folder thick enough to mean trouble sitting on the desk. She didn't even say good morning. Sit. Inside that folder was the end of the world as I'd built it. First page, warranty deed transfer, March 5th, 2018. My lake house, my retirement. The last solid thing I had from Maya was in Logan Holt's name. Blue ink, clean loops. Not my pen, not my day. I know my own signature the way a carpenter knows the weight of his hammer. And this one, too shallow in the two, even in the tail. Someone practiced. Rebecca didn't set look at me. She didn't set need to. Page 2. Power of attorney. Supposedly signed by me. Notarized at 11:58 p.m., March 4th. Her finger tapped the timestamp. Office locks at 9. Only Marissa has badge clearance after hours. Marissa Green, Logan's girlfriend, paralegal, notary, all access pass. I stared at the ink until the lines blurred. Tell me this is a mistake, I whispered. Rebecca closed the folder. Slow. It sits forgery, Kaison. I left with copies clutched so tight the folder bent at the corners. The gravel crunched under my boots when I turned up the drive. Morning light hit the house exactly the way it always had, like nothing had changed. But everything had. I built that house in 1992. 2 hands, 1 hammer, too much stubborn pride. Cedar beams, wide porch, stone fireplace. It wasn't just a house. It was the promise I made Maya when she was still here, the place where her laughter lived between the walls. But the state of North Carolina didn't care about promises. The state cared about signatures. The lock turned wrong beneath my hand, a deadbolt I hadn't installed. I froze. Through the kitchen window I saw him. Logan, 29 years old, my only son. Sitting at my kitchen table like he owned the air in that room. He was holding Maya's black mug. The one she used every single morning until the day the chemo took her appetite. For a second our eyes locked. Just glass between us. Him inside, me outside. He didn't set flinch. He didn't set look guilty. He lifted the mug, a toast. And something in my chest cracked. Not loud, not obvious, just a hairline fracture in everything I'd ever believed about blood and loyalty. Open the door, I mouthed. He didn't. He just set the mug down and turned his eyes away, slow, like he'd already decided which side of the line he stood on. I stepped back, breath sharp in the cold air. My hand found the iron fence post at the edge of the yard. Cold bit into my palm. Not yet, I whispered, because this wasn't the moment to swing. It was the moment to remember exactly how this felt. Cold fence, deadbolt bite, my son refusing me entry to my own house. I sat in the truck with the engine off, pulled up Buncombe County's property database. Deed transfer hash 1843-221, filed, recorded, public, irrevocable. at least until someone tears it apart line by line. Grantee Logan J. Holt. Grantor Kaison Holt. Document Control. RCN 418992. They'd moved fast. Faster than I thought my son was capable of. My hands shook, not from rage but from disbelief. The kind that drains your bones before it feeds the fire. I checked the badge log entry Rebecca had shown me. 11:58 p.m. Marissa Green. 1 minute later, the notary stamp. At that exact time, I'd been home, feet up by the fireplace, dozing in my robe. No alibi, no witnesses. Just a creaking porch and a cup of lukewarm tea. 2 weeks earlier, Logan had said, "Dad, I should learn more about the paperwork for the house, just in case something happens to you." Just in case. I didn't adhere the blade in it then. I do now. At dusk, the fog rolled back in, just as it had that morning. The house glowed warm from the inside. His house, if you asked the county recorder. I didn't shout. I didn't throw rocks through my own windows. I turned the key that no longer belonged to me and felt the refusal deep in my gut. Revenge doesn't announce itself with thunder. It starts with silence. I sat in the truck until the stars cut through the mist. On the seat beside me, that folder, deed, POA, badge log. Evidence, not yet power, but it would be. The porch creaked once in the night wind, the sound slipping through the cracked window like a ghost. That creak used to mean home. Tonight it meant war. I whispered it again. 3 words, a promise, not a plea. Not yet. I didn't sleep at the lake house. I drove until the gaslight blinked, parked under the flickering sign of Kaison Holt and Sons Construction, and stared at the hammer mounted on the wall behind my desk. The same hammer I'd used to drive the first nail into that house 26 years ago. Logan took it with a pen. Atch take it back with the truth. End of Act 1. They say time heals. It doesn't. It just sharpens the edges of what you can't forget. April bled into June, June into December, and the house I built with my hands sat on the other side of a lock that didn't belong to me. 2018 became 2019 like a slow, cruel joke. I didn't live at the lake house anymore. I slept in the cramped loft of my construction office, 32 miles from the water, next to the hammer that started it all. Every night I'd stare at that hammer, hanging above the drafting table like an accusation. You built everything except the one wall you should have protected. Rebecca filed the initial objection to the forged deed that spring, but objections are like polite taps on a door already bolted shut. The house stayed in Logan's name, and my son, well, he wasn't hiding. The first time I saw the doc again, it wasn't in person. It was on Instagram. Logan had posted a photo, June 2nd, 2018. He was standing on my dock with a beer in one hand, Marissa curled against him like she owned the place too. The caption read, "Our lake life begins, Solola's, Lentfarash, Forever House. Forever House." That was the word Maya used when we first framed the roof back in SEFTA 92. This is our forever house, Kai. I stared at the photo on my cracked phone screen until the pixels blurred. That dock wasn't just cedar. It was 30 summers of sweat and sunburn. It was the place where I scattered Maya's ashes when the cancer finally won. And now it was a backdrop for his hashtags. Every month I drove by the house at night. I told myself it was to make sure the place wasn't falling apart, but the truth was uglier. I was haunting my own property. Sometimes I'd see their lights flicker through the blinds. Once I saw her silhouette in Maya's old robe. Maya used to wear that robe in the mornings when the air was cold, the cuff frayed from the time she caught it on a nail near the porch step. I never fixed that cuff. I left it the way she wore it. And there Marissa was, wearing it like it was hers. If you've ever felt your pulse go quiet, not loud, not raging, just silent, you'll understand the kind of anger that burrowed in me that night. Money started to drain almost immediately. Rebecca and I met in her office on August 27th, 2018. She wore her hair down that day, softening her lawyer face, but nothing could soften the numbers. "They moved fast," she said. $318,400 is already gone. Gone where? She slid the bank statements across the desk, like a verdict. March 12th, cashier Sip says, Check $49,500. March 17th. Another for $49,500. Four more over the next 2 weeks. BMW dealership. Cashier's check image. Logan Holt. The last entry, $318,400 withdrawn by April 2nd. He didn't just take the house. He drained everything I'd stacked over 3 decades of work. This was supposed to be my retirement? I whispered. Her retirement? Rebecca Sepp's pen tapped the bottom of the page. He Sepp's counting on you to break down, Kai, not fight. I didn't answer. Because at that time, she wasn't wrong. There's a special kind of loneliness that sits in the air when your bloodline steals your legacy. It's not quiet, it hums, like a refrigerator running in an empty house. I started sleeping on the office floor. Not because I had to, I had other places to go, but because I couldn't face the house that wasn't mine anymore. I kept a ritual every night. I'd make black coffee in the tin camping pot Jimmy gave me back in '96. I'd pour it into an old thermos, sit under the hammer on the wall and scroll. Logan's lake parties. Marissa's soft-lit bathroom selfies with the mirror I installed with Maya. Every post was like a nail being driven through my ribs. Jimmy Flores, my old foreman, found me one night in October 2018, passed out in my chair. He smelled like diesel and honesty, same as he always had. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You look like shit. I grunted. Good to see you too. He nodded toward the stack of printouts on the drafting table. Bank statements. Did transfer. Every receipt I sipsed underlined, dated, and filed. What are you doing, Kai? Just watching him bleed you out. My throat went tight. It sets, my son. Jimmy walked over, picked up a copy of the forged POA. Yeah, and he sets robbing you like a stranger. You either fight or you die standing still. That sentence sat in the air like wet concrete. He didn't say anything else. He just reached up, touched the hammer on the wall, and left. Winter came hard that year. The kind that sticks to your lungs. The house by the lake lit up for Christmas without me for the first time in 26 years. Logan posted a photo of their tree through the picture window Maya and I had installed together in '93. Marissa stood beside him in front of the stone fireplace I laid brick by brick. She was wearing the robe again. The caption read, "Home for the holidays, Sanol la la la, wanin hash blessed." I poured my whiskey into the sink that night. It didn't help anymore. Rebecca called me just after New Year's, January 3rd, 2019. She'd gotten the bank's official record of the withdrawals. "It's worse than I thought," she said. "He didn't just buy the car. There are transfers to 2 LLCs, empty shells. His name on them?" She hesitated. "No." Marissa sips. Smart. Hide behind the girlfriend. Make the paper trail harder, but not impossible. "Any movement on the deed?" I asked. "Slow. But the forgery sips is shaky. Wrong ink. Wrong date. We set find the cracks." I stared at the line of figures on the bank printout. $318,400 wasn't just money. It was every hour I spent bent over a foundation in the heat. It was the college fund I never touched. It was Maya's lake house, our forever house, turned into a currency in my son's hands. I started taping everything to the wall. Receipts, deed copies, photos, badge log anomalies. The forged deed went dead center, under the hammer. Every night I'd trace the line of my fake signature with a ballpoint pen, over and over, like carving the scar deeper. The loops were neat, precise. Marissa's work, probably. She was always the neat one. Some nights I'd whisper the date out loud. March 5th, 2018. March 5th, 2018. Over and over until the words stopped sounding like a date and started sounding like a wound. People talk about revenge like it's born in a moment. A switch flipping, it isn't. Revenge is born in silence. In long nights where the porch creak echoes in your head even though you're 30 miles away. In the way your son's smile on a screen becomes a blade instead of a comfort. I didn't fight that first year, I just existed. A ghost circling the edges of a house that used to be mine. But even ghosts leave fingerprints. On March 5th, 2019, 1 year to the day after the forgery, I drove back to the lake in the middle of the night. I parked by the fence. The porch light was on. Their laughter drifted out through the open windows. Warm, carefree. I pressed my hand against the same cold iron fence post I'd touched a year earlier. Same bite, but something different in me. Not rage, not grief. Resolve. I whispered the words like an oath. No more. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had a wall of evidence, a hammer that had built my legacy, and a silence that was about to end. Revenge doesn't start with fireworks. It starts in a diner booth at 7:12 a.m. on a February morning, when the world's still gray and you've run out of tears. February 18th, 2020. The air in Asheville carried that brittle kind of cold that gets under your nails. I sat in the corner booth of Henderson's Diner, the same one where Maya and I signed the company and corporation papers in 1989. The formica table was still scratched from her wedding ring. I ran my thumb over that gouge and felt the weight of 30 years pressing back. Rebecca slid into the booth across from me, her red hair tucked under a wool hat. No preamble. She pulled out a thin binder and laid it between us like a loaded gun. "You ready?" she asked. No, but I nodded anyway. The binder contained what a year of silence and watching had built inside me. Bank records, forged POA, deed transfer, receipts I'd kept in plastic sleeves like relics. Every single one dated, signed, and highlighted. I wasn't just a man who'd lost something anymore. I was a man with evidence. Rebecca flipped to the first page, the forged deed. "We both know what this is," she said. "But you need to understand the road ahead. This isn't set fast. It isn't set clean. It's set to be months, maybe years." I leaned forward. "Then we start now." She didn't smile, but I caught the flicker in her eyes. Respect, maybe, or the understanding that something inside me had shifted for good. I hired Lyle Merritt that afternoon. Private investigator, ex-cop. 62. He'd once told me in passing that he never lost track of a liar. His office smelled like wet pine and burnt coffee. I laid the forged POA on his desk. He didn't even look up. "Family?" "My son." That made him pause. "You sure you want to go down this road?" I didn't blink. He forged my name. He took my house. He took $318,400. This isn't set a road. It setup's the only road left. Lyle leaned back in his creaky leather chair, cracked his knuckles, and nodded. "Then let Sets get to work." The first week was reconnaissance. Lyle pulled property transfer logs, notary stamp registries, and badge entry data. What Rebecca suspected, he confirmed. March 4th, 2018, 11:58 p.m. Marissa Green badge entry at the law firm. March 5th, Swartausen accent. POA notarized under her commission. March 6th, 2018. Deed recorded with Buncombe County Control ID RCN 4189992. But there was something else buried in those records. The notary log claimed the signature was witnessed at noon. Marissa's badge said otherwise. Lyle circled the discrepancy in red ink. "This," he said, "is the first crack." While Lyle dug through records, I started digging through myself. My old tax returns from 1990 to 2017. The original deed from when Maya and I bought the land in '92. Her death certificate from 2016, which legally transferred ownership solely to me. Paper doesn't lie. I spent nights in the office, tracing my own signature from old contracts. My penmanship had weight, muscle memory. The forgery had precision but no soul. I underlined the places where the forger faltered, the hesitation at the tail of the nun, the way the loop of the K didn't arc far enough. The truth was buried in ink, and I was going to dig it out. Jimmy stopped by one night with a six-pack of cheap beer and the same blunt truth he'd always carried in his tool belt. "You look like hell," he said. "Hellcep's warmer." He eyed the wall. Every page was pinned in perfect rows. Bank statements, deed copies, POA, screenshots of Marissa's Instagram, my son's life dissected like blueprints. "You building something?" Jimmy asked. I stared at the mess. "Yeah, a war." He didn't laugh. He just nodded, picked up a tack from the floor, and stuck it through a corner of the forged deed. "Then build it straight." Rebecca called on February 23rd. The deed chain is solid, Kai. Legally, the property should still be yours. My accepts will left it solely to you in 2016. No transfer, no sale. That forgery is their only leg to stand on. I could hear the subtext in her voice. If you push, you can win this. That night I drove out to the fence line again. The lake house glowed like a stranger's home. Porch light on, porch creak cutting through the night air like it remembered me even if the locks didn't. I pressed my hand to the fence post, same as always. Cold steel biting through skin. This time, though, the silence didn't own me. I owned it. The next morning, Rebecca and I filed the first formal claim of forgery and ownership dispute with Buncombe County. I still remember the pen scratching my name across the affidavit. She looked at me afterward. Once this starts, you don't get to take it back. I guess I'm not the one who started it, I said. Lyle called on February 28th. Got something. He texted me a grainy photo snapped from a security camera downtown, 11:53 p.m. March 4th, 2018. Marissa, brown envelope, entering the side door of the law firm. He zoomed in on the corner of the envelope. You could just make out the edge of the power of attorney form, the same document that had stolen my house. Found the nail, he said. We just need to drive it in. By the first week of March 2020, my wall of evidence had grown. Forged POA. Badge log anomaly. Property chain of title. Proving I'd been sole owner since 2016. Tax records. Deed history. And in the center of it all, like the keystone of a bridge, Maya's will, signed March 21st, 2016. Her voice on paper naming me as the sole owner. The will wasn't just a legal document, it was a promise. And my son had tried to erase it with a midnight pen stroke. But the thing about forged signatures is that they can't overwrite the truth. Not permanently. I started sleeping again. Not much, but enough to wake up clear. I stopped scrolling through Logan's posts like a ghost, and started treating him like what he'd chosen to become an opponent. I moved my financials into a new P.O. box, set up encrypted backups of every file, changed my personal email passwords, bank alerts, and mailing addresses. No confrontation, no warning, just quiet movement. The silence that once suffocated me was now the cover I needed. On March 3rd, 2020, I met Rebecca and Lyle at the diner again. Same booth, same scratched formica. She laid a yellow legal pad on the table. Step 1, injunction. Step 2, subpoena badge logs. Step 3, reconstruct chain of title. Lyle leaned in. Step 4, find what they scepter hiding. Storage unit, I said. They both looked at me. I didn't have proof yet. Just a gut that had spent 30 years building things straight. If they'd forged once, they'd stored something somewhere. Then that's step 4, Lyle said. I walked out of Henderson's into the kind of early spring sunlight that burns away fog but leaves the chill. I could smell cedar in the air from the lumberyard down the street. 2 years earlier, I'd stood at that fence line whispering, not yet. A year later, I stood there whispering, no more. Now I wasn't whispering. I was building. Revenge isn't a single blow. It's heat. Slow, controlled. The kind of fire that eats through steel without making a sound. March 2020 arrived sharp as broken glass. 2 years had passed since Logan forged my name and locked me out of my own house. I'd spent one of those years dying quietly, and the other laying the foundation for war. Now it was time to strike the first nail. March 4th, 2020. I sat at Rebecca's office, the blinds half drawn against a soft morning drizzle. She placed 2 documents on the desk with surgical precision, a motion for injunction and a subpoena request for badge logs. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried weight. This isn't a warning shot, Kai. This is the start of the war. I signed both documents with a pen I'd had since 1992, the same pen Maya used when we signed the mortgage on that house. As the ink dried, I whispered to myself, not yet, but close. Lyle called me that night from the parking lot of Henderson Sitch's diner. His engine idled in the background. Got what we need. Badge logs. Yeah! March 4th, 2018, 11:58 p.m. entry. Marissa Green. No corresponding exit until 12:47 a.m. I leaned against the hood of my truck, the cold metal grounding me, and the notary log, stamped as noon. She couldn't have notarized anything legally after hours. That sips your second crack. He wasn't wrong, but cracks weren't enough. I needed collapse. Rebecca filed the injunction March 6, 2020. It froze any further transfers, liens, or encumbrances tied to the lake house. For the first time in 2 years, the legal weight shifted. Not enough to win, but enough to make sure they couldn't keep moving their pieces in the dark. Meanwhile, I made my own moves. I opened a new P.O. box downtown and rerouted every bank statement, insurance document, and retirement account notice. I opened a separate safety deposit box at First Citizens Bank for physical copies of my evidence. No digital trail. Every page had a home, every receipt a nail. Lyle met me 2 nights later in the empty parking lot behind the old lumber yard. He handed me a manila envelope and a flashlight. Inside were photos. Marissa, late night. A public storage facility on Riverside Drive. 2 visits in the last 3 months. Same unit, same brown envelope tucked under her arm. Lyle exhaled a stream of cigarette smoke into the night. I don't tell people twice unless something smells. What sips in the unit? Not sure, but I can get a court order. Rebecca filed for a search order 3 days later. The slow fire burned steady. March 10th, 2020. Henderson's Diner, Booth 3. The same one that held every turning point of my life. Rebecca set down a stack of bank slips. They drained the last of the $318,400 by March 6, 2018. 6 cashier SIPS checks. 2 of them, $49,500 each, lined up perfectly with a BMW purchase. His name, Logan Holt. Dealership confirmed. Registered March 7th. I stared at the slip, the ink a little faded. The numbers permanent. I thought about the nights I'd spent driving a rusted Ford to construction sites, while my son signed away my future in a leather dealership chair. Paper trail sepsis clean, Rebecca said. Too clean. That set's good. She frowned. Good? Because clean paper leaves fingerprints. Lyle called 2 weeks later. Got the order. March 25th, 2020, Unit #43, Riverside Storage, Deputy Present. Lyle with his camera, Rebecca with her legal pad. I watched from the edge of the lot as the metal door rolled up with a scream that cut through the afternoon air. Inside shelves. Banker Seps boxes. A safe. Lyle snapped photos. Rebecca cataloged each box as it came out. Every envelope had labels in Marissa's neat handwriting. On the second shelf, middle row, sat a red folder labeled Final Transfer, Dad. The sound my jaw made when I clenched it wasn't pretty. Rebecca slipped on latex gloves, flipped the folder open, and read. Forged POA drafts, withdrawal slips, printouts of bank statements, even notes in Marissa's handwriting about notarization times. The war wasn't set coming. It had already started 2 years ago. I was just late to the battlefield. I drove by the house that night, not out of weakness, but out of ritual. The porch light was on, same as it had been every night since they'd moved in. The porch creaked when the wind hit it. I could hear it from the fence line. That sound used to comfort me. Now it felt like it was taking my side. Through the kitchen window, Logan was laughing with Marissa. She wore Maya's robe again. The frayed cuff caught the light as she poured wine. I could have walked up to the door, banged on it, shouted every name under the sun. But shouting doesn't build cases. Silence does. March 29, 2020. Rebecca Sepp's office. She laid out the contents of Unit #43 on her desk, like evidence in a trial that hadn't happened. Every envelope numbered. Every slip dated. Forged POA draft, Marissa Septa's handwriting. 6 cashier SIPS checks totaling $318,400. Bank transfer memos. Marissa Sipp's notary logbook with a torn corner. Handwritten timeline dated March dry. 2008. Rebecca tapped the timeline with the tip of her pen. This proves premeditation. Lyle nodded from the corner, arms crossed. This isn't big crime. This is planned theft. I stared at the red folder on the desk. Final transfer, Dad. The word Dad hit me like a nail to the chest. I spent the next nights alone at the office, pinning copies of each piece of evidence to the wall, slowly, methodically, like building a house again from the foundation up. Forged POA on the left, bank slips in the middle, storage evidence on the right. In the center, the photo Lyle sent me weeks earlier, Marissa at 11:53 p.m., brown envelope in hand. Jimmy stopped by one evening, just like he always did when things got heavy. He cracked a beer, leaned against the wall, and stared at the spread. Looks like a goddamn war room, he said. It is. He pointed at the red folder. That right there? That sips their blueprint. Not anymore, I said. By April 2nd, Rebecca had filed the second injunction, this time targeting the trust they were building with the stolen funds. Logan's BMW purchase was already on record. Marissa's name was tied to the storage unit. The forged documents were now in official custody. Everything was slow, deliberate, precise. The fire wasn't roaring, it was eating through the beams beneath their feet. I didn't sleep much, but when I did, I dreamed of that house. The porch creak, the hammer above the fireplace, Maya's black mug warming my hands. The things they tried to steal weren't just wood, steel, or money, they were mine, and slow fire doesn't forgive. It consumes. People don't lose wars because of the big moves. They lose them because of cracks. Small, sharp, silent. Marissa Green made hers on a hot afternoon in the summer of 2021. June 23rd. Asheville. The kind of day where the sun feels like it's peeling paint off the world. I was sitting in my truck behind a construction site outside town, eating a sandwich that tasted like nothing, when my phone buzzed. It wasn't Rebecca or Lyle. It was Jimmy. "You still gonna want to hear this," he said. "Meet me at the diner. Henderson's Diner, booth 3. Always booth 3. By now, the staff didn't even bring me a menu, just a black coffee and a stare that said they'd learned not to ask questions. Jimmy leaned forward, forearms on the table. One of Marissa Sipp's coworkers stopped by the yard. I raised an eyebrow. "And?" "She sit's been talking big. Says she and Logan are set, two forever house, two is sits bragging about inheritance like she built that place with her own damn hands." My stomach went cold. The last time I'd heard the words forever house, it had come out of Maya's mouth in 1992, when we set the last cedar plank on the porch. Hearing it from Marissa's, that was gasoline on a spark I'd been sheltering for 3 years. "She said anything useful?" I asked. Jimmy smirked. "She bragged about the notary stamp, too, said she was the reason that the transfer went through." Isbet loud enough that half the break room heard. He slid a napkin across the table. Written on it in his scrawl was the coworker's name and number. "She's not as clever as she thinks," Jimmy said. I wrapped the napkin carefully. Some men pocket lottery tickets. I pocketed loose ends. I called Rebecca that night. She didn't waste time. We can subpoena the coworker for a statement. If she confirms what was said, it'll help demonstrate intent. But Rebecca wasn't finished. We're also going to subpoena the notary logs. Didn't that? We already have those. She tapped something on her end. I heard the pages flipping through the receiver. We had the original badge log, but not the official notary registration records. That ESIP's state level. And if Marissa stamped outside legal hours, the stamp record won sit match. That's when it clicked. Their forgery wasn't just immoral, it was sloppy in ways only arrogance makes possible. July 6th, 2021. Rebecca received the official North Carolina notary register. It confirmed everything we suspected. Marissa's notary stamp wasn't logged on March 4th or March 5th. The entry was missing, no record at all. According to the state, the stamp she supposedly used to notarize my signature never existed on that date. Rebecca called me into the office and laid the document down like a blade. "This," she said, "is the third crack." I traced the blank line on the registry with my finger. It felt cleaner than any signature. Truth usually does. Meanwhile, Lyle kept digging. Marissa Siftis' late-night storage visits hadn't stopped. In fact, they sifted increased. June, July, August. Twice a month, regular as the tide. He sent me photos, each time stamped and filed. June 9, 2021, 10:42 p.m. July 17th, 2021, 11:13 p.m. August 3rd, 2021, 12:06 a.m. Same brown envelope, same unit hash 43. He met me behind the lumberyard again on August 5th, cigarette burning low between his fingers. She seps nervous, he said. People don't sep make midnight trips to the same box unless something sep's leaking. What do you think Jay's in there? Insurance policies. Originals. Maybe a second forged doc. Whatever it is, she doesn't set trust keeping it at the house. I thought about Maya's will, sitting locked in Rebecca's office safe. Real documents have weight. Forgeries get hidden in the dark. August 19th, 2021, Buncombe County Superior Court granted Rebecca's motion for a secondary evidence seizure of the unit. Same process. Same door screaming open, same red folder sitting on the middle shelf. But this time there was more. Behind the folder, taped flat to the inside wall of the unit, was a handwritten timeline in Marissa Sipsis' looping script. A list of dates and check marks. March 4th, access badge. March 5th, stamp or. March 6th, transfer of. March 7th, deposit. March 8th, Dad will fold. 5 years of grief and rage found their fuse in that one line. Dad will fold. I stared at it while the deputy read the inventory list aloud. My throat went dry. She hadn't just forged my name. She'd counted on me giving up. Rebecca added the seized document set to the evidence docket. This is gold, she said. The timeline shows deliberate planning and motive. It ties her actions directly to the forgery. What happens next? I asked. Next? She slid her glasses down and looked me in the eye. We squeeze. August 30th, 2021. The State Board of Notaries received a formal complaint against Marissa Green. Not from Rebecca, from me. I signed the complaint in the same diner booth where the war began. She might have forged my name once, but this time the ink was real. The complaint outlined unauthorized after-hours notarization, missing official log entry, conflict of interest through personal relationship, facilitation of fraudulent deed transfer. 3 weeks later, the investigation notice landed on Marissa's desk. I didn't have to see it to know it shook their nest. Lyle texted me that night. Unit activity stopped. Zero movement in 2 weeks. Marissa's arrogance had always been her weakness. She talked too loud, left too many threads dangling. She'd worn Maya's robe like a crown. But a crown looks different under subpoena lights. Rebecca subpoenaed her notary stamp records directly from her employer. There it was, an entry dated March 6th, 2018, backdated manually. Clear as day, a lazy forgery of a forgery. We didn't say a word to Logan, not yet. The best traps are the ones you don't announce. By October 2021, everything was moving. Rebecca prepared the formal civil fraud filing, attaching the POA evidence, storage discoveries, Marissa's missing stamp record, and her own handwritten timeline. Lyle compiled a chronological dossier, 142 pages cross-referenced against my bank records, deed history, and security footage. He called it the blueprint. I called it justice in progress. I pinned Marissa's timeline to the wall of my office that night. Her handwriting stared back at me. Dad will fold. Not this time, I whispered. Jimmy showed up the next day, grease on his jeans, a case of cheap beer in his arms. He studied the evidence wall in silence. She sits the crack, he said finally. She's the whole damn fault line, I answered. He nodded. Good. Let it break. We sat in silence for a while, the hum of the old office fan filling the space. The hammer above the drafting table caught the afternoon light, throwing a thin gold line across the red folder. I wasn't sent a ghost anymore. I was a builder. And every wall needs a weak point. December 2021, the Board of Notaries suspended Marissa Green's commission pending a full fraud hearing. Rebecca delivered the notice to me herself. She's officially under investigation, she said. a rare smile breaking through her lawyer face. I didn't smile, not yet. This was just the first fault line opening, but cracks spread fast once the pressure sips right. End of Act 5. Some wars end with a verdict. Mine began to end with a ringtone. October 19th, 2022. Asheville, late afternoon. The sky hung low, the kind of heavy gray that presses on your lungs. I was sanding down an old cedar plank at the shop when my phone buzzed on the workbench. Logan Holt. For 4 years I'd imagined how that name would sound again in my ear. I thought it would be fury, fire, but all I felt was a steady, cold stillness. The kind that comes after enough time has burned the rage clean. I wiped my hands on my work rag and let it ring twice before answering. Dad, his voice cracked around the word, we need to talk. I didn't say anything. He filled the silence like he always had, talking faster, words spilling into the air like they'd outrun consequences. I know Rebecca Sipp's building a case, he said. I Sipp's seen the letters, I know about the suspension. And he hesitated, the unit. The word unit made my jaw tighten. He knew, Marissa must have told him. You can keep doing this, he said. You started this, I finally answered. There was a pause, then a soft, pathetic laugh. You don't get it, do you? It was supposed to be mine anyway. Mine. That word didn't sound like my son. It sounded like every signature he forged, every lock he changed, every dollar he bled for my life. You forged my name, I said quietly. You drained $318,000. You let her wear your mother Sepp's robe. I didn't forge anything. He started, but his voice cracked in the wrong place. I did not raise mine, Tolgan. Silence. Then something broke in his breathing. Fine, he whispered. She forged it. Okay, she forged it. She said it was just paperwork, Dad, that we set to clean it up later, that you wouldn't set to fight. My hand tightened on the phone. Those were the words I'd been waiting years to hear, the crack in the dam. North Carolina is a one-party consent state. I'd spoken to Rebecca about this possibility months earlier, so when Logan called, I pressed the small side button on my phone. The recording icon blinked red. The phone didn't shake in my hand. My heartbeat didn't race. It was steady. Sharp. I kept my voice level. Why? She said it was mine anyway, he said. The house, the money, everything. That you built it for me. That's what Mom wanted. Mom. That word did not belong in his mouth anymore. Maya would have wanted you to stand on your own 2 feet, I said. Not steal from me. It wasn't stealing. His voice rose suddenly, desperation finally bleeding through. It was mine. Its steps always been mine. You just never saw it. And just like that, the truth was naked. After 4 years of legal maneuvering, evidence stacking, badge logs, subpoenas, injunctions, and cold nights staring at the house from the fence line, I had what I needed. A confession. Voluntary. Recorded. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even breathe any differently. I just stared at the workbench. The cedar plank beneath my hand smelled like the porch we'd built in 1992, when Logan was 4 and covered in sawdust. He'd grown up with his feet on those planks. Now he'd stolen the whole foundation. I called Rebecca 30 minutes later. She didn't even say hello. It happened, I said. She didn't ask for details. You recorded? Yes. Send me the file. I plugged my phone into my laptop, transferred the file, and emailed it to her through the encrypted folder she'd set up for sensitive evidence. The moment she hit play on her end, I heard it again, his voice, my son, saying the words out loud. Fine, she forged it. Okay? She forged it. She said it was just paperwork, Dad, that we clean it up later, that you wouldn't fight. Rebecca Sepp's voice softened, but didn't waver. This changes everything. The next morning, she filed a supplemental evidence notice with the Buncombe County Superior Court. The confession was time-stamped, geolocated, and certified for submission. She called me as she left the clerk Sepp's office. This isn't just a civil case anymore. This can go criminal. Good. Are you sure? She asked. He's still your son. I let the silence stretch. Blood doesn't set erase signatures. Do it. Lyle drove out to the shop that afternoon. He leaned on the truck, crossed his arms, and stared at me like a man who'd seen this kind of storm before. So the boy cracked. He didn't set crack, I said. He confessed. That sepsis cracking with paperwork. I almost smiled. He tilted his head. And you recorded legally? One party state. Good man. We didn't talk about forgiveness. Men like us don't. We talk about proof, paper, and what happens next. October 23rd, 2022. Rebecca sat across from me at her office. A printed transcript of the call lay between us. I'd read it 15 times already. Line 11. Fine, she forged it, okay? Line 14. She said it was just paperwork, Dad. Line 18. That you wouldn't set fight. She tapped the margin with her pen. This is the spine of the case now. Between the forged POA, the notary log discrepancies, the storage timeline, and this it sets airtight. What happens next? I asked. She looked almost sorry. We give him the chance to settle. I leaned back, the chair creaking. And if he doesn't set? Her voice turned to steel. Then we bury them in court. Logan's attorney reached out 2 weeks later. A smooth-voiced man with the kind of practiced neutrality lawyers use when they're desperate but pretending not to be. We said are prepared to offer restitution, he said, over speakerphone. Rebecca sat beside me, her hands folded like stone. $250,000. No admission of wrongdoing. Confidentiality clause. I stared at the black mug in my hand, the one Maya used every morning. I didn't answer. Silence is heavier than shouting. Rebecca Sipp's lips barely moved. No deal. The lawyer cleared his throat. It sets a generous. It sets incomplete, she interrupted. He didn't know it, but the war had already ended when Logan said those words on the phone. This was just cleanup. That night, I drove to the lake house again. It wasn't the first time, but it was different. The porch light burned yellow against the fall fog. The porch creaked when the wind shifted, and through the kitchen window I saw him. My son, sitting at my table, not laughing this time, just staring at the dark. I stood at the fence line, hands in my jacket pockets, the same cold iron under my fingertips. He looked up. Our eyes met through the glass. This time it wasn't arrogance in his face. It was the faint gray understanding of a man who's finally realized the house he stole is already slipping away. I didn't set wave. I didn't set speak. I turned back to my truck, the gravel crunching beneath my boots, the same sound it made the day I first built this place. Rebecca called on November 4th, 2022. We got a trial date. September 12th, 2023. I exhaled through my teeth. Good. And Kai? She added softly. I'm proud of you. I didn't know what to do with that. I'd built houses, not pride. I hung up and stared at the hammer hanging above my drafting table. The same hammer that started everything. The same hammer that would outlast this. The war had a date now, so did justice. September 12th, 2023. Buncombe County Courthouse. Asheville. The air that morning was sharp and too clean, the kind of air that cuts the edges off sound. My boots echoed against the marble floor as I walked through the glass doors. I'd imagined this day 100 times over the past 5 years, sometimes with rage, sometimes with dread, but in the end it was just quiet. Logan used to hold my hand in these hallways when he was 6, back when Maya had jury duty and we'd pick her up afterward. That memory flickered for a heartbeat and then vanished behind the steel of the moment. Courtroom 4B smelled like wood polish and nerves. The oak benches groaned under people shifting in their seats. Sunlight spilled in through the tall windows, hitting the flag just enough to make it ripple in the draft. Rebecca walked beside me, her steps sure and slow, carrying the thick trial binder we spent years building in it. The forged POA and deed transfer, March 2018. The badge logs proving Marissa Sifta's midnight entry. Bank records tracing $300 $40. Storage unit evidence. Marissa Sifta's handwritten timeline. Dad will fold. Logan Apsa's recorded confession, October 19th, 2022. She didn't look at me when we took our seats. She didn't need to, everything between us was already set in motion. Logan entered through the side door. Suit too crisp, tie slightly crooked. He'd always hated ties. For a second, I saw the boy who built the railing with me when he was 8, who painted the porch white in the summer of 2002 barefoot and laughing. Then I saw the man who forged my name. Marissa followed close behind him, her eyes darting to the gallery. She'd cut her hair since the last time I saw her, as if that could erase anything. She wore the kind of beige blazer lawyers like, even though she wasn't one anymore. Not since the state suspended her notary commission. Her hands twisted in her lap when she sat down. Good. Hands that forge don't sit still under oath. Case number 23 CV 1412, the clerk announced. Holt versus Holt. I didn't breathe for a beat. Holt versus Holt. Hearing it out loud was like swallowing glass. Judge Harrison presided, an older man with silver hair and a stare that could peel paint. I'd worked on his deck back in 1997. He probably didn't remember. I did. All rise, the bailiff said. Everyone stood. I stared at the judge's gavel. Heavy, maple. It reminded me of the hammer hanging above my drafting table. Rebecca's opening statement wasn't a performance. It was a scalpel. Your Honor, she said, standing straight, no theatrics. This case is about betrayal wrapped in forged ink. In March 2018, the defendant and his accomplice falsified a power of attorney, transferred a $1.4 million property without consent, drained $318,400 in liquid assets, and counted on silence to bury the evidence. My client did not fold, he built. She laid a single sheet on the podium, my original deed. He built the house with his hands in 1992. They tried to take it with a pen. Every word landed like a nail through wood. Logan's attorney spoke next, a man in a blue suit so shiny it looked borrowed. His words were smooth, rehearsed. This is a family dispute that escalated unnecessarily, he said. My client believed he was acting within his rightful inheritance. There was no malicious intent, merely misunderstanding. I almost laughed. Forgery isn't a misunderstanding. It's a crime. Rebecca called the first witness, Rebecca Shaw herself, testifying as both attorney of record and fact witness for the forged document timeline. She moved like someone who's been waiting for this day almost as long as I had. On March 5, 2018, she said, a power of attorney appeared in our records notarized under my firm SIP's stamp. The office was closed at that time. Only one person had after-hours badge access. She lifted Exhibit 3, the badge log. 11:58 p.m. Marissa Green. The judge leaned forward. And what time was the document notarized? Rebecca didn't flinch. The log says noon. The badge says midnight. Crack. Next witness, Lyle Merritt, P.I., 62, wore the same battered jacket he'd had the first day I hired him. He walked to the stand like a man who's been in enough courtrooms to know they're just rooms with good acoustics. He described the storage unit stakeouts. The envelope. The timeline taped to the inside wall. Rebecca handed him Exhibit 7, the red folder with final transfer, Dad, written in Marissa's handwriting. He held it up for the judge. This is evidence recovered under court order from Riverside Storage Unit #43, he said. This folder contained drafts of the forged POA bank withdrawal slips and a handwritten timeline indicating planned transfer and expectation of no resistance. I watched Marissa's hands tighten in her lap as her own handwriting was read aloud. Then came the audio. Rebecca queued it up on the court SIP's playback system. The red light blinked once before Logan SIP's voice filled the room. Fine, she forged it. Okay? She forged it. She said it was just paperwork, Dad. That we set clean it up later. That you wouldn't fight. You could sift her to pin drop. The bailiff shifted on his feet. Even the judge Set's eyebrows lifted a fraction. Logan stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, but I could see the color draining from his face. The sound of your own guilt is louder when it echoes off courtroom walls. Marissa was next. She hadn't wanted to testify, but subpoena doesn't ask for permission. She took the stand in her beige blazer, knuckles white against the wood. Rebecca was surgical. "Miss Green," she began, "did you enter Shaw and Associates on March 4th, 2018 at 11:58 p.m.?
Yes.
Did you notarize a power of attorney after business hours?" "No." Rebecca raised the badge log. "This shows otherwise. Did you notarize a power of attorney outside legal hours?" Marissa swallowed. I I stamped it later." "Did you backdate it?" "The same." Rebecca held up the state notary registry. The stamp wasn't set, even logged. Marissa Sipp's lips trembled. She said it was just paperwork. She... Marissa Siftis' eyes flicked to Logan. Crack. 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 Logan didn't take the stand. His lawyer objected, citing Fifth Amendment concerns, but silence in a courtroom can be louder than a lie. Rebecca closed our case with quiet fire. No raised voice, no grandstanding. "Your Honor, this isn't about misunderstanding," she said. "It's about theft. It's about forgery. It's about a son who decided that blood gave him permission to erase a lifetime of work. My client built his legacy with cedar, sweat, and faith. His son tried to steal it with a pen, but paper burns. Wood remembers." I felt my throat tighten at that line. That was Maya Sips's line. Sip said it once when a storm ripped the shingles off the porch in Sips's 98. "Paper burns, wood remembers." The defense had nothing but weak inheritance arguments, and a half-hearted attempt to paint Marissa as the mastermind. Logan sat still, hands folded like a stranger. The same hands that once held a paintbrush, not a pen full of lies. The judge took 31 minutes to deliberate. I counted every second in silence, palms flat on the wood of the bench, feeling its grain under my fingertips. When he returned, the room fell into that strange, suspended quiet before a gavel falls. "Mr. Holt," he began, looking at Logan, "what you and your accomplice did was not a misunderstanding. It was fraud, calculated, and deliberate." Logan Sepp's eyes didn't lift. "I hereby void the forged deed, return title of the property to its rightful owner, and order full restitution of $318,400. The court also refers this matter to the District Attorney Sepp's office for potential criminal charges." The gavel came down. It didn't sound like wood. It sounded like a hammer striking home. People stood. Marissa started crying softly. Logan didn't move. His suit hung off him like it no longer fit. Maybe it never did. Rebecca exhaled next to me, not in victory but in release. Lyle clapped me on the shoulder once. Jimmy stood in the back row, arms crossed, nodding like a man who'd watched a long blueprint finally become a structure. I walked out of the courthouse into the September sun. It was warm against my face, brighter than I remembered. The lake house wasn't just mine again. It had never truly stopped being mine. But now the world and the law recognized what my hands had always known. I drove straight to the house that afternoon. Gravel under tires, the iron fence catching the sun. I unlocked the gate with a new key, one that didn't have my son's fingerprints on it. When I stepped onto the porch, it creaked beneath me like it was exhaling too. I ran my hand along the railing, the same one Logan helped paint at 8 years old. That memory used to sting. It still did, but it didn't own me anymore. I opened the door. The air inside was still quiet, mine. The black mug sat on the counter. I poured coffee into it and leaned against the kitchen wall, letting the weight of 5 years settle. Outside, the lake was glassy and still. Wood remembers. Victory doesn't sound like a fanfare. It sounds like a key turning in a lock that finally fits again. October 2nd, 2023. 20 days after the gavel hit the wood, the paperwork was done. The forged deed voided, the restitution order signed. Logan and Marissa's attorneys had stopped calling. The court didn't need me anymore, but the house did. I parked at the edge of the gravel drive just after sunrise. The fog rolled low over the lake, the same way it had on the morning of March 14th, 2018, when Rebecca's call ripped my world apart. 5 years had gone by. The fog hadn't changed, but I had. I stepped out of the truck, boots crunching on the gravel, the air cold enough to bite. The porch stood exactly where it had always been. Cedar beams steady, white paint a little more faded, railings scarred by time but unbroken. I ran my hand along the edge of the post. It was smooth in some places, splintered in others like memory itself. This was my house again. Not just legally, spiritually. The kind of ownership no stamp can forge. Inside, the air was stale. Not the kind of stale that comes from rot, the kind that comes from being touched by the wrong hands for too long. I set the new brass keys down on the counter. Their sound against the wood echoed louder than it should have. I opened the windows one by one, letting the October breeze sweep through the kitchen, the hallway, the living room. Marissa's perfume was gone, but the ghost of it, cheap floral mixed with entitlement, lingered in the corners. The hammer above the fireplace was exactly where I'd left it the day I was locked out. She hadn't touched it. Maybe she was smart enough not to. Or maybe even thieves understand some things don't belong to them. I stood beneath it for a long time, remembering the first nail I drove into that frame in 1992. Maya had handed me a glass of sweet tea, laughing because I'd missed the nail the first time. Back then, we didn't know what betrayal sounded like. We just knew what wood felt like under our hands. Raking the house wasn't just maintenance, it was ritual. Jimmy showed up that afternoon with a set of new schlag locks and 2 thermoses of bad coffee. He didn't ask to be here, he just was. That's the thing about real friends. They don't wait for invitations when your house is on the line. We worked in silence. Just the sound of metal on metal, screws turning, porch boards creaking beneath us. The front door, the back door, the garage, the basement. Every lock that had once been theirs was mine again by 3:17 p.m. I pocketed the old keys. Not to keep, to bury later. Jimmy wiped his hands on his jeans and leaned against the railing. How sips it feel? I turned the front doorknob, heard the clean click, and exhaled, like the house just exhaled with me. He grinned. Good. Let it breathe. We cracked open the thermoses and sat on the steps. The lake was calm, the light breaking over the trees in slivers. For 5 years, I'd looked at this house from the outside. Now I was home. But even victories have echoes. 2 days later, an envelope arrived. Cream-colored, no return address. My name written in Logan's handwriting, the same handwriting that once scrawled Father's Day cards and later signed forged documents. I didn't open it, not then, not that day. I set it on the counter beneath Maya's black mug. I wasn't ready for his words, whatever shape they took. On October 9th, I received the call from Detective Raines with the DA's office. Mr. Holt, she said. We said filed charges. Logan was arrested that morning for felony fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Marissa faced accessory and forgery counts. Raines explained everything in her careful, practiced tone. How they'd be booked, how bond worked, how the process would unfold. I listened to every word. When she was done, she paused. I know this isn't set easy. I didn't build this house to watch it get stolen. I said quietly. This isn't set about easy. Understood. When I hung up, I realized my hands weren't shaking. Not like they did 5 years ago when I first touched the cold fence and saw Logan through the kitchen window. There's a difference between breaking and hardening. I wasn't set broken anymore. 3 nights later, I walked the house alone. Slowly, room to room, not like someone checking for damage, like someone reacquainting himself with a body he'd once known intimately. The living room, where Logan had taken his first steps in 1994. The hallway, where Maya's laughter used to echo when she teased me about my tool belt. The porch, where the fog sat like a guest that never left. Everything was still here, waiting. It had outlasted their arrogance. The click of the new locks followed me like a heartbeat. I spent hours in the garage the next day sorting through what they'd left behind. A few boxes, receipts. Marissa's perfume bottle, a pile of mail addressed to Logan. They hadn't bothered to clean up the mess. Taped to the inside of one cabinet was something that made me stop cold. A photo, Maya, Logan, and me, summer 1998. He was 4. She was wearing that straw hat she loved. My arm was around them both. His little hand was gripping mine. For a long time, I just stood there staring at it. The boy in that picture hadn't betrayed me. The man who came after had. I peeled the photo off carefully, folded it, put it in my jacket pocket. Some memories you keep, even if they hurt. October 15th. The house was finally fully mine again, locks, deed, and silence. I invited Jimmy over, and for the first time in half a decade, we didn't talk about court or lawyers or forged signatures. We grilled steaks on the deck. The boards creaked under our boots. The lake caught the reflection of the house like it was holding it close. "You gonna sell?" he asked. I shook my head. No, thought not. "This house isn't set for sale," I said. "It's sets for remembering." Jimmy lifted his beer to remembering. The clink of the bottles was soft, final. Later that night, I stood alone on the porch with the black mug in my hands. The wind off the lake was cool. The stars stretched across the sky like they used to before everything went to hell. I thought about what Rebecca said after the verdict. "You won, Kai." But the truth was more complicated. I didn't win a war. I reclaimed a life. The porch creaked beneath me. That same low groan it gave the night I whispered not yet. This time it wasn't a battle cry. It was peace. December 5th, 2023, Asheville. Snow came early that year. It blanketed the lake and the trees around the house in the kind of silence that makes you hear your own breathing. The planks of the porch groaned under the weight, the sound slow and deep like an old man stretching his bones. I used to love winter here. Maya and I would sit by the window with cinnamon tea and count how many deer came down to the water. Logan used to press his face against the glass and leave little fogged handprints on it. That was a long time ago. Before paper and greed and betrayal. Now winter didn't feel soft. It felt clean, and clean can be cold. The criminal hearing wasn't a spectacle. It wasn't supposed to be. Most of the real damage had already been done in the civil courtroom. This was about accountability. Logan arrived in a gray suit this time, not navy. He looked thinner, paler, like someone who'd finally realized the walls weren't just closing in, they were already shut. Marissa wasn't with him. Her lawyer had secured a separate plea deal weeks earlier. I didn't sit close to him. I sat on the opposite bench, hands folded, my new key ring heavy in my pocket. The bailiff Sepp's voice echoed off the walls. Case number 23, CR 2154. State of North Carolina versus Logan Holt. It wasn't Holt versus Holton. This wasn't my war now. This was the state's. Detective Raines testified first. Calm, methodical. She walked the court through the timeline. March 4th, 2018. Forged power of attorney. March 5th. Fraudulent deed filing. March 6th. Withdrawal of $318,400. October 19th, 2022. Recorded confession. September 12th, 2023. Civil verdict. She spoke like someone assembling a machine. Each piece clicked perfectly into place. I could almost hear the screws turning in the silence of the courtroom. The DA introduced the recording again. Logan Sepp's voice filled the room a second time. "Fine. She forged it." "Okay, she forged it. She said it was just paperwork, Dad. That we clean it up later. That you wouldn't fight." The clerk didn't even flinch. The judge didn't blink. Everyone had heard this before, but this time it wasn't just evidence of betrayal. It was evidence of a crime. Before the sentencing, Logan stood. His attorney whispered something in his ear. He looked at me, not through me, not over me, at me. "Your Honor," he said, voice thin as paper. "I accept responsibility." His lawyer had probably written the statement for him, but his voice cracked once. Just enough that I knew some part of it was real. "I thought I deserved it," he continued. "I thought because it was my dad Sip's house, it was mine." For the first time since the day I saw him through the kitchen window holding Maya's black mug, he looked like my son, not the man who forged my name. Just a boy who lost himself in greed. But some things break clean, others don't set. The judge nodded, his expression carved from stone. "Mr. Holt, the court accepts your plea." The sentence. 12 months suspended sentence. 5 years probation. Full restitution of $318,400, payable through structured payments tied to assets and future income. Permanent bar from financial POA over any property in the state of North Carolina. The words landed in the room without drama. When the gavel fell, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a funeral without flowers. I walked out of the courtroom first. The cold air hit me in the face, sharp and unforgiving. A few reporters stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, but I kept walking. This story wasn't for the news. It was for me. Rebecca caught up beside me. Her coat collar was turned up against the wind. "It's done," she said simply. I nodded. "Yeah." She studied me for a second. "How do you feel?" I exhaled, like something sep's been cut out, but the bleeding finally stopped. She squeezed my shoulder once, then let go. No congratulations, no pity, just shared understanding. We'd built this case nail by nail. Now it was finished. Back at the house that night, the porch creaked under the snow. As I walked up the steps, I carried a manila envelope in my hand. Not evidence this time, just paper that meant something different. Inside was my new living trust. Rebecca and I had finalized it 2 weeks earlier. The lake house, the construction business, and everything tied to my name was locked into a trust that couldn't be touched by anyone without my signature. No loopholes, no forged pens, no Logan. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Maya and I used to plan our lives, and signed the final page with a steady hand. December 20th, 2023. I drove to First Citizens Bank to finalize the trust filing. The clerk slid the stamped documents across the counter with a polite nod. It was a small moment, unremarkable to anyone else. But to me it was a fortress. The house no longer existed on the thin edge of someone else's ambition. It was mine, untouchable. On Christmas Eve, I walked to the edge of the lake with a shovel. The snow was crusted over the ground, but the soil beneath was soft enough. I dug a shallow hole behind the fence. The same fence I bet gripped that night in 2018 when I whispered, "Not yet." I dropped the old keys into the hole. The ones they used, the ones that failed me. The shovel slid the earth back over with a soft sound. Gone, buried, done. That night I poured cinnamon tea into Maya's black mug. The same blend she used to make every December. The house was quiet. The locks knew, the trust signed. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next move. There was no war at the fence line, no light in the kitchen window that didn't belong to me. There was just silence. And me. I don't hate Logan. Hatred is a fire that burns your own house down, but forgiveness doesn't live here either. Some things can't be folded back into what they were. Family isn't set a shield. It sets a choice. And blood isn't enough when the knife comes from your own bloodline. I looked out over the frozen lake, steam rising from the mug in my hands. Somewhere in the distance, a single snowflake caught in the porch light. This was judgment, not revenge. And it was enough. Snow has a way of swallowing sound. Out here on the lake, when winter hits just right, even the wind learns to whisper. December 31st, 2023. The last day of the year. I sat on the porch of the house I built 31 years ago, wrapped in a flannel jacket older than my son. The air was crisp, the boards beneath my boots cold and groaning softly under their own weight. The house had gone quiet again, not the tense quiet of waiting for the next blow, but the kind that comes after a long storm finally passes. For the first time in 5 years, the silence didn't scare me. I poured cinnamon tea into Maya's black mug, watching the steam curl against the winter air. She used to make it every December, extra honey, a cinnamon stick, and a single orange peel. She said it made the house smell like warmth. The house doesn't smell like her anymore, but when the cinnamon hits just right, it almost does. The lake was frozen at the edges. A single maple leaf lay trapped in the ice, its veins catching the low sunlight like tiny cracks in glass. I'd spent years staring at this lake from the outside of the fence, locked out of everything I built. Now I was inside again, and it was mine. I thought about all the things this porch had seen. Maya in 1993, barefoot, holding Logan on her hip while I hammered the last plank into place. Logan at 5, painting the railings with white paint that ran down his arm in streaks. Logan at 29, locking me out with the same hands that once clung to mine. A porch remembers everything. It doesn't choose sides, it just holds the weight. I ran my hand along the railing, tracing the small gouge at the corner where Logan dropped a hammer when he was 10. I never fixed it. I guess some scars belong where they fall. The living trust paperwork was signed and stored, the restitution schedule filed, the old keys buried behind the fence. There were no calls from lawyers, no knocks on the door, no fogged glass with someone else's breath on it. It was just the house and me, exactly how I built it. The locks clicked clean when I turned them at night. Now, that sound had become the new heartbeat of the place. Strong, final, mine. People talk about revenge like it's a fire, quick, hot, loud, but they don't talk about what comes after. They don't talk about the quiet, the stillness that wraps around you when the noise stops. For me, it wasn't fireworks or shouting or satisfaction that filled this place after Logan's sentencing. It was something softer. The absence of fear. I'd lived too long with the feeling of being almost erased. My name almost stripped off the deed. My life almost taken from me without breaking a single lock. Logan and Marissa didn't need to break windows. All they needed was a pen, and for years that was enough to keep me outside my own home. But Wood remembers. And so do fathers. I took a slow walk through the house that afternoon. Each room had its own voice. The living room still smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. The hallway light flickered the way it always had, a wire I never bothered fixing. Maya used to say it gave the house a heartbeat. I never changed it. The kitchen felt warmer than it should have, like it exhaled when I walked in. The black mug sat on the counter where it belonged. Not in Logan's hand, not in Marissa's. In the bedroom, I opened the dresser drawer where I'd kept the first deed to the house since 1992. Crisp, folded, never far. I'd always told myself it was just a piece of paper. But it wasn't set. It was proof of sweat, of love, of work. Paper can be forged. But the life behind it, that's harder to steal. That night, I lit a single log in the fireplace. The flames caught slow and steady, the way good fires do. I hadn't used the fireplace much since Maya died. The night she passed in 2016, I sat here alone until the last ember died out. I told myself I'd light it again when the house felt like home. It took 7 years. I ran my finger along the handle of the hammer mounted above the fireplace. It had built this house nail by nail. Logan never took it. He couldn't. It wasn't set, just a tool. It was a boundary. As the fire crackled, I thought about Logan's face in court. Not the anger, not the arrogance. The stillness when the gavel fell. There are some moments in a man's life that don't leave. That one won't. For either of us. I don't know if Logan will ever understand what he tried to take from me. Not just land, not money. He tried to take Maya's laughter out of the walls, our life out of the wood. But he failed. Because what you build with your hands, what you bleed into, doesn't surrender quietly. It would be easy to end this story here and say forgiveness came. But that would be a lie. I don't forgive him. I don't hate him either. Hatred is heavy, it pulls at you like wet concrete. What I feel is simple. A clean line, a boundary drawn in iron. He'll live his life with the weight of his choices. I'll live mine with the weight of what I reclaimed. And that sep's enough. As midnight crept closer, I stepped back onto the porch. The snow crunched beneath my boots. The lake mirrored the stars. This porch used to feel like a battlefield. Now it felt like a sanctuary. I whispered to the cold air, to Maya, to the quiet itself. You didn't lose me. You gave me away. And I came back. January 15th, 2024, Asheville, North Carolina. The snow had thinned since New Year's. The lake wasn't fully frozen anymore, just wearing a skin of fragile ice. If you tossed a pebble, it cracked like glass and swallowed it whole. I sat on the porch, same black mug in my hand, cinnamon steam curling into the cold. Some mornings don't need noise, they just need breath. The letter had been sitting on the kitchen counter for 3 months now. Cream envelope, my name in Logan's handwriting. The same hand that once wrapped around mine to steady a hammer, the same hand that forged my name to steal what wasn't his. I'd walk past it every single day. Sometimes I did glance at it, sometimes I didn't. But I never opened it, because some answers don't deserve to live inside your house. The house had grown quiet again, but not the empty kind. It was a good quiet, the kind you build after a long war. I'd learned how to live with the creak of the porch again, with the shadows of old memories that didn't hurt anymore. The locks clicked clean each night, a sound that had become my ritual. I didn't look over my shoulder anymore. The past wasn't behind me, it was under my boots, part of the foundation. That morning, Jimmy pulled up in his beat-up Ford. The muffler always rattled before he killed the engine. He walked up the steps, crunching the last of the snow beneath his boots, holding two thermoses like always. He set one on the railing, grinning like he owned the place. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He leaned against the post I built in Suffolk 92. "House looks good." "Feels good," I said. And it did. It felt solid again. He eyed the envelope on the counter through the kitchen window. "You ever gonna open that?" "No." "Not even a peek?" I shook my head. Not everything needs to be answered. He gave a low whistle. "That sip's cold." "No," I said softly. "That's Sep's piece." He let it sit. Jimmy wasn't a man who needed explanations. He just nodded and took a long sip of his coffee. We sat on the porch for an hour. The lake cracked inside as the sun hit it. A single crow cut through the silence overhead. The house felt different in winter sunlight, like it was standing taller than it did before the war. Or maybe it was just me. There are moments in life that stretch like steel cables. The night Rebecca called at 6:58 a.m. The deadbolt refusing to turn, seeing Logan through the window with Maya's mug. Those moments pulled tight over the years, threatening to snap. But here, on the porch, they didn't hurt anymore. They were part of the architecture. After Jimmy left, I walked to the fence line. The same spot I stood 5 years ago when I pressed my hand against the cold wood and whispered, "Not yet." The ground was hard with frost. I knelt down, fingers brushing against the soil where the old keys were buried. I didn't need to dig them up. I just needed to know they were still there, proof of everything I'd survived. The porch creaked behind me. The same sound, different man. Inside, the envelope waited. Still sealed, still silent. I poured myself another cup of cinnamon tea and sat at the table. That table had held contracts, deeds, tax slips, forged documents, subpoenas, affidavits, recordings. It had held battles. Now it just held steam rising from a black mug. I ran my thumb along the edge of the envelope. The paper was soft now, worn at the corners. I could have opened it in a second. But here's the truth. I didn't want his words to shape the ending. Logan had already taken enough space in this house. His handwriting didn't get the last line. I walked to the fireplace, where the hammer still hung above the mantel like a sentry. That hammer had built this place. Nail by nail, plank by plank. It had outlived both the betrayal and the war. I lit a single log in the fireplace. It cracked slowly as the flame crawled across it. The light touched the walls the same way it had when Maya was alive. I picked up the envelope, and I dropped it into the fire. It curled at the edges. The handwriting blackened first. His name folded into ash. No shouting, no final confrontation. Just silence and smoke. Some things deserve to be burned quietly. I walked to the window and watched the lake. The sky was streaked in orange. Winter sunsets here are quiet. Not loud like summer, just a slow fade. I thought about the man I was 5 years ago, standing outside my own house, locked out by my own blood, and the man I was now, inside. Whole, I'll never know what that letter said. Maybe it was an apology, maybe it was excuses, maybe it was just empty words. But that's the thing about closure. You don't get it from someone else. You build it yourself. I'd rebuilt mine with locks, deeds, court filings, silence, and a porch that remembered everything. Jimmy once told me, "Revenge is a hammer. Justice is the house you build with it." I didn't understand then. I do now. I didn't set out to destroy Logan. I set out to protect what I built, to defend the weight of a life earned nail by nail. In the end, he gave me something he never meant to: clarity. The kind that doesn't come from forgiveness, the kind that comes from choosing yourself. The sun dipped below the tree line. I stood on the porch one last time for the night, mug warm in my hand, breath curling like smoke. The lock clicked behind me with that clean, perfect sound. I whispered to the house, to the lake, to the woman who taught me how to build both. You didn't lose me, you gave me away. But I found my way back. And with that, the war ended. Not with a bang, but with a porch creak. And peace.